unusual icebreakers continue. And Ariel has been very generous and been listening to my crazy icebreaker ideas. So it popped into my head the other day of it doesn't have to be a full crowd, but if you had to do karaoke, what is your go-to karaoke song? And I can go first. I'm a fan of rock, and so I would probably do "No One Knows" by Queens of the Stone Age. It's a pretty simple lyrics, nothing too crazy. Pretty memorable lyrics that I could probably pull out. I've listened to quite a few times. It's on my running playlist, which helps with that. I've heard it quite a few times, but I feel like it's a good, not a huge range where I have to hit like Mariah Carey levels on the top, or the Barry Manilow bottom. So right in the middle, kind of my range. Yeah.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Teenage Dirtbag by Wheatus. Anything by the band Placebo that they've got, which tends to not be much, or it's tough. There's so many choices. If they've got Rock in the Suburbs by Ben Folds, I think I got to throw that out there because it's got to be light, right? Like you can't go too heavy with this song, especially if you're doing karaoke in front of with maybe you're in a bar rather than just with a group in a private room. Yeah. I mean, Teenage Dirtbag is a real easy one to throw out there. Or a bunch of songs by Blink-182 as well, because I'll just revert to feeling like a teenager again.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I like that Matthew, he said, what's your karaoke song? And he's like, well, here's my whole set. I'm doing a whole show.
Wait, does everyone... Let me hide the sheet. Does everyone not have a set list?
I love it. Oh my gosh. I think I've answered this before in a different meeting, and my go-to is just anything that does not have a lot of singing and just a lot of music so I can just dance awkwardly on stage.
Okay.
And there's just no singing. I'm just up there.
Would you do like a lip sync battle? Would your song change if you were doing lip syncing instead?
Yes, that would be fun. Boy, I would love if I did a lip sync battle. That's a totally different thing, but I would probably choose some sort of musical theater,
Oh yeah.
Singing in the Rain or something, I don't know.
Yeah, something where you can dance around.
Yes.
And make a production out of it. I like it.
Yeah. How about you, Kelsey?
I'm with you, Ariel, that I'm I am tone deaf and I know it. You will never see me do karaoke. I definitely Googled on the side, funniest karaoke songs when you can't sing. Googled it. So I now have a list. I still wouldn't sing any of these because they're Wannabe by the Spice Girls. And I was Ice Ice Baby by Vanilla Ice. But I'm with you, Ariel, that I'm because you immediately think of, Tom Holland, lip sync battle, doing Umbrella, that I was if you could do it as a whole choreographed performance, then it sparks some joy in me, but I still don't even want to lip sync. Let's just say that enough theater tryouts as a child that I failed scarred me enough for life that I was I was a dance minor, but I still would never want to move my lips. So that's my answer to that.
Whereas I'm realizing I didn't even think of musical theater numbers, and now I have a separate list.
So I'm going with Matthew to be his agent and stage manager, but I will not be performing.
One of my favorite lip sync battles, and I'll end with this, is The Rock doing Taylor Swift's "Shake It Off" on Jimmy Fallon, and it's amazing because he's lip syncing, and so it's Taylor Swift singing, but it's The Rock.
It's The Rock.
It's amazing.
That's awesome.
He's a national treasure.
Yeah. Emma Stone doing All I Do Is Win. I just decided if I had to do one, that was incredible, and that's just a fun song. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, just like karaoke singers rely on their technology, thank you. So do businesses for their day-to-day. Yes. All right. So today on our Tech for Business podcast, we're joined by Matthew, our GRC analyst and vCISO, and Andrew, our customer strategy advisor, who last time we talked workstations. This time we're talking servers and applications. I'm going to kind of throw it over to Matthew because I know you had a lot planned for today, and I'll let you just dive right in.
Thank you. So those of you who listen to the other podcasts know that we realized pretty early on how much of this topic we could cover during the time frame we'd set aside, so that you guys don't listen to us just talk for an hour and a half flat. And so we really wanted to segment servers from this because it's such a completely different conversation. Even though you can generalize some of it, and you've probably heard it be generalized, it really shouldn't be. The conversation should be bigger, from the types of servers, and we'll dig into all of this, to the way your applications can impact that, the licensing can impact that. There's a bigger conversation and a different conversation that goes into how does everything that we do keep running, and when should we replace it? Then how should we replace workstations? And so with that being said, while AJ and I both have these conversations, I think AJ had one yesterday, which is a little more recent than my last one. So AJ, what's the first thing for you that kind of comes up when you're having these conversations about replacing servers?
First thing is really, what is the goal of the company? Everybody hears the cloud. Everybody knows, okay, the cloud is, for lack of better words, somebody else's computer that's always available. It's resources that are available to everybody instead of having to hold them yourself. Is that the goal of your company? If that is, great. Let's talk about some of the things that do that. Coming into the applications, Microsoft has done a very good job at taking a lot of the services that they have traditionally hosted on their servers on a site that you on a server that you manage, and they've transitioned them over to Azure and 365. One of the easiest examples is mail. People don't have mail servers anymore. It's through 365. And
As
so,
a quick shout out there, or you shouldn't have mail servers unless you have a very specific need for them. Hosting your own Exchange server is a real task.
Yes, especially nowadays.
Not to let my feelings shine through too heavily, but
I still remember how to configure them, and still remember that stuff. But it's really where are you going, and trying to find an equivalent to what is available for you. And so Microsoft is an easy example because they have a lot of things, and most, if it's Google, great. Google has a lot of those services as well. When you come to specific applications, it's really working with that vendor. And it's really identifying those. So I would say the first step is identifying what is dependent upon those servers. We talked about Microsoft. There's ERP systems. There could be a database. There could be print services. If you're going to take away a server, yes, file sharing. If you're going to take away that server, what breaks? And trying to find that solution to move to the cloud if that's your company's goal. Servers used to be, you had one server, it had a job, it was on all that hardware, you'd unplug it, it's that one server. It's not really the case anymore. I don't even want to guess because I don't, I'm going to age myself and whatever. But hypervisors or hosts are very common now, where you have one or two pieces of hardware, actual physical hardware, and they have virtual machines or VMs hosted on them, and you can spin up and run multiple servers on that host, right? So you could have your domain controller and a print server and your domain services or whatever services you're running, you can have it on that one. It's, they're different VMs. So that's the environment that we're looking at now, of can we translate that to the cloud or replace that hardware? Most is that cycle of 4-5 years. The discussion came up because I have a customer. It was, as Matthew said yesterday, the warranty is coming up in 2024 in March, and the company told our contact, hey, our goal is to be in the cloud by January of 2025. And we said, okay, that's perfect. We'll renew the warranty for 1 more year, which is easier through HP or Dell or whatever service. We can say, hey, let's renew this warranty, making sure that if something happens to that hardware, especially aging hardware, that we have that coverage. And then, okay, we have we have an end date to replace that hardware and have that plan. It is great that company goal is to have it. We're going to have a lot more backing on the initiatives that we're proposing and from the IT department, because that's the company's goal. It can be more difficult when you need to get leadership involved in saying, hey, this is why we should do it. And a lot of the reasons are, frankly, moving anything to the cloud or any resource that is always available. Something you don't have to manage. Mail is a great example because it's pretty much almost always moved over to the cloud now and hosted somewhere else. It's always up, or it has, I don't know what Microsoft guarantees, but 4 nines or 5 nines of availability. Management is a lot easier. You can do it from anywhere. You don't have to come into the main location to access the server. You don't have the server costs. You don't have everything that's related to that server costs, to the security of that server. What happens if something happens to it, to the data. So all of those translate to that physical hardware. So it's trying to find what solution works best. One of the big challenges that we're going to have with this customer is they have a database that we have to see if we can move it to a cloud resource. That's not always possible. And I've had other discussions where they host one thing on their hardware, physical hardware on site, and everything else is moved up. We've done a pretty much full migration as much as we can to a cloud resource, but it's not always possible. But it's looking into it, and that's really where it's finding the solutions using a technology partner like CIT to say, hey, what am I running? How can this move? Talking to your vendor of, okay, you're using QuickBooks. Okay, what does QuickBooks have? I know QuickBooks has QuickBooks Cloud. What does that look like? What is their timeline for the migration? Because it's not just going to be a flip of a switch, and it never is. And again, I applaud this company for saying January of 2025. That's a realistic goal for a lot of these things, in being able to set benchmarks of saying we want to get our new QuickBooks in by July. So we know we can run through several months of month end of going, do we have everything, and doing a spot check. Again, it's all the different systems you have to think about that on the whole scale. And if you're going to change stuff on a full scale, that's a lot of changes. So having a realistic timeline too is something to keep in mind. January of 2025, I think, is a good goal. It's also, we're having these conversations now to make sure that we can hit that goal. And that's still going to be, we're going to have to make sure we keep things on track on our side and be able to help facilitate those conversations to make sure we hit that goal.
Yeah, I think I like I agree with everything you've said. There's so much of this that is important for how we think about this long term, right? We're talking about this at a technical level, and that's where people think about it, because we're talking about hardware, we're talking about technical hardware, but it's really a business conversation. And when we're talking about hardware lifecycle, the reason we have to think about what do you want to do in 5 years is because it's not as simple as just replacing the laptop, right? We're talking about, like you said, every piece of hardware and software that is critical to your infrastructure effectively. If this goes down, how bad is that for you? And then we're talking about what can we take off your hands? We're talking about, like you said, going to the cloud, creating a hybrid environment. We're talking about how we can make things more resilient in Office. You spoke about hypervisors and VMs. And without digging too deeply into those, one of the most common questions I still get is, what differentiates a server? And the answer is, you decide it is one in the short term. That really is the only thing that makes it a server. People can argue the hardware in it. Yes, sure, there's special server hardware that is only designed to go in servers, but that's not because it can't go in workstations. It's just it goes in servers because we want the better stuff in there. And so the overarching idea here is not so much we need to replace the server. It's we need to think about exactly what our environment's doing, and we need to think about how we can make it better and more resilient and future-proof it as best as possible. Mail servers are still the best example, and I know Andrew went into that a couple of times, but the move to Exchange Online, which became Microsoft 365, significantly helped a lot of customers. It's helped many businesses, not just because there have been multiple security issues with local Exchange servers in recent years, but because all of this now became handled by Microsoft. You didn't have to worry about it. You didn't have to do updates or make sure you were checking things. Back when I started as a service center technician, Exchange Online security issues and technical warnings were one of the majority of things I looked at, because if someone configured them incorrectly, all of a sudden you're getting pinged from all over the world because mail is something people can sell online. So when we're talking about it, we're really building down to that asset knowledge. And for me, as you guys have heard, if you listen to this, as someone who works heavily in the GRC space and talks about regulations and compliance, there is so many things we need to keep in mind for that. And I often come back to the FFIEC, who has a tiered system for how they judge things. But one of their higher tier ones for servers states that every server should only perform one function. And that doesn't mean that there's only one thing running on it, but it means it should only provide one service to the organization, whether that is the print server, like Andrew mentioned, whether that's a file share, whether that's your domain name services or DNS services. What you're looking for is a system that allows for resilience by saying, if this thing breaks, can I still keep running in some way? The servers that Andrew described of everything's on one big server and then that server gets shut down and you lose everything is how it was run, back when I started doing this, and it's the way some organizations still run. The resiliency is zero. If something breaks and requires a reboot, you lose access to everything. So we're trying to come up with ways to break that out, come up with every service. And for me, it still always starts with an asset management list. Every single application you need, every single server and piece of hardware you currently have, break them all down, find the ones that work best, find out how you can make them survive, find out where they should go. Can they be moved to the cloud? Speak with those vendors if it's a specific tool. Maybe you need a hybrid environment where some things are in the cloud and some things are in your office. That's okay. That still may be incredibly cost effective for you. But what you're trying to do is really confirm and create a system that allows you to move forward. Sometimes moving everything to the cloud isn't the right goal for you. And sometimes that means you'll need a couple of hosts, maybe a bunch of VMs all doing different things. I know this is going to sound a little crazy to a lot of people, but I honestly think that most organizations need at least one host and 4 VMs nowadays. Any less than that, and I'm wondering what you're doubling up on. As I said, the FFIEC has these requirements, and some environments I'm looking at have 6 to 8 hosts, and we're talking 30 or 40 servers. And when I say servers in this case, I mean VMs running on those hosts. And the reason for that is that if you're running a piece of software that handles your financial data, but you're also running one that handles your internal communication data, you shouldn't have to lose both if one of them breaks. And so if one breaks, that service is down, okay, but everything else is running because you've segmented them safely. And so, like I said, these conversations feel like we're having technical conversations, but really we're having that business conversation. Which of these things is the most critical? How comfortable can you feel with one of them disappearing? How long can they disappear for? We have an RTO and RPO podcast that may be helpful in those types of conversations. But there's so much of this is really just the servers are not in and of themselves important, because no one's physically touching them the same way a workstation is being touched. The thing that makes them important is what you're doing with them. And so if you aren't planning for what they're going to do, what they're going to do in the future, and how you're going to replace those on a regular schedule, you're basically in reactive mode, hoping something doesn't break. And that is the part that I feel a lot of people don't want to think about and definitely don't want to talk about.
Yeah, I agree. It's just like if a workstation is doing a specific function that we talked about last time, like the shipping computer. What is your business going to look like if you don't have that running? If you unplugged your server, what aren't you going to be able to do? It's always kind of funny when we're decommissioning things, and I'm sure Matthew has done this, at some point you just need to pull the plug if that is turning off the service, and you see what breaks.
We call this a scream test, where we pull the plug and see who screams first, the loudest, about something not working anymore.
Exactly.
They're bad. We don't want to do them, but sometimes it's a necessity.
and within any transition of these kind of services, you have that point where you just need to initiate that screen test, see what happens. But that's built in. That should be something you know about. The extreme case would be like, I wonder what we're running in our environment. That depends on our server, and going in the server closet and just pulling plug. That would be a little extreme, so I don't recommend that. But talking and knowing about the different functions that occur within your business, that is the place to start. Of going, what do people use on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, and is that dependent upon something that you are responsible for as the business? Can I make somebody else more responsible for it? And be able to take some, honestly, you sleep a little easier at night. I have had many, coming back to our tech days, Matthew, when you mentioned the mail and a lot of things can go wrong with services, I just think of people who may not pay for a static IP, right? You have to go in and you have to change a record to make sure mail can flow to the organization again, because their IP changed. They didn't pay for a static one, or they couldn't pay for a static one. That's just one example of one of the responsibilities you don't have to worry about anymore. And knowing that your services are backed up to at least a certain point, and there's other products that help getting it past the 30 days that Microsoft has, but you don't have to necessarily pay for that and continue to have that. So really just peace of mind of moving those things as much as you can, to make it somebody else's, responsibility, and being able to have it.
One of the big conversations I have is basically just about that. I have risk management conversations constantly. And as part of that, we're talking about transference of risk. who can we give this risk to so that it's not on our hands? In this case, that's what you're doing when you move to Exchange Online. I'm showing my age. When you move to Microsoft 365, is you're saying, I trust Microsoft to do this. Microsoft is taking on that risk for me. And there are so many things you can do that with. It's why QuickBooks now has QuickBooks Online, because they are offering to take on that risk so you can transfer it from yourself to them. So many of these things are about doing that. Servers are a huge upfront cost for a lot of organizations. The amount you have to pay down just to get those servers in office, and then effectively you're thinking of them as depreciating assets over the course of their life. When you move to the cloud, most of the time it's subscription based. So yeah, there's still that recurring cost, but it's over time. And one thing that I found that's been interesting is it's not actually that much cheaper to move to the cloud. Sometimes it's a little more expensive, but because it isn't an upfront cost, it does feel a little better sometimes to just say it's going to be X amount per month versus I need to drop in some cases. And I did a server replacement not too long ago that was, I think it was $80,000 per server that we were replacing. And we ended up doing, I think, 5 or 6 hosts for this organization. And then there was all the servers on top of that. So for them to move the cloud wasn't an option, but the cost of doing that, they were looking at, I think it was ended up being close to $500,000 for the cost of that after they were done with everything. And that's, again, a recurring 5-year cost. Now, you should be including that in your budget. You should be ready for that. But at the same time, you're going to want to mitigate that as much as you can. Technology is important and you want to spend as much as you have to, but the 5-year cycle gives you time to confirm that's what you have to spend.
Yep.
And not to harp on about it, but again, asset management, you can't confirm that's what you need to spend if you don't know what you have. Please do asset management.
Nice. This is a big conversation. I'm glad we split it up into multiple podcasts today. And I want to make sure that we're covering everything you want to cover. But so what I've heard from our workstations conversation and our server conversation, it's really important to know what you have and then where you want to go. And my question is, besides budget, because that's always a hurdle, what is the biggest hurdle that businesses are kind of bumping up to when they're talking about their server lifecycle and kind of replacement? And then how would you approach that?
I'm going to hop on about it again. It's not knowing what they have. It's not knowing exactly what they're doing. They don't. Part of that is maybe they're trusting someone internally to do it all. But again, this is a business conversation, and you need to be aware as business leaders of exactly what's going on in your system. If you don't understand part of it, or if it just is kind of one of those things that makes you glaze over, which I fully understand. There are people who fully glaze over as soon as I start talking. I can see it happen. But it's really about, you need to be able to make an informed decision. And if you trust someone else to make that decision for you, that person needs to be in these discussions. They need to be fully made aware of what's going on, because you can't fix what's the saying? You can't. I've forgotten the saying. You can't fix what you don't understand is not right. Paraphrasing.
Yeah.
You can't do this correctly and save money in a correct and actually financially responsible way if you don't know what you're actually saving money on. And a lot of times when I see people who still have those all-in-one servers, and sadly I still do see them pretty regularly, it's because someone said, oh, I know a way to do all of this in one for a small amount of money. Cool. You're going to experience significant downtime. No question about it. It's going to happen. And I can probably guarantee as we get closer to that 3 or 4 year mark, you're going to experience that downtime once a month, if not more often than that. So know what you have and where you're putting it. And that for me is the number one biggest hurdle. What about you, Andrew?
I would say that's number one. Number two is vendor availability. Does your vendor currently have an option that you can move to cloud resources? Not everyone does. And knowing what that is, and if you need to transition from that on-site to the cloud, or a full different system, that needs to be looked at as well. Because if the piece of hardware or excuse me, the piece of software isn't meeting your needs, it's you need to assess if it's really the right program for you. If that's your goal, to move to the cloud, and the only thing is keeping you is, this program that does a certain function, most of the time there's another program that can help you with that. And it's, again, working with that vendor, understanding that, and really saying, hey, sometimes it's been pushed. Like, I've had to push vendors of going, what options do you have? Like, what, do you have anything available? Or else, maybe we're going to have to look somewhere else. And that's, that's a hard thing to swallow sometimes, because it's a sunk cost fallacy, right? We've spent, 10 years and X amount of dollars on training and have so much invested in it, but that's a past cost. What is going to be your future cost because of this lack of cloud transition, or lack of supportability? If they're like, oh, we have to, we shut down or we got bought and we don't support it anymore. So again, it starts with that asset management of knowing what you have, and then knowing what the options are for each of those.
Thanks. Well, we're running low on time, so it might be something that we come back to in the future. I think these are really important conversations, but I just wanted to thank Matthew and Andrew for joining us today. Thank you so much. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, subscribe. It's how we know that you're interested in these topics. Or if you have a topic you'd like us to discuss, reach out to us at info@cit-net.com, or head out to our website, cit-net.com/podcast. And we'll be back next week with an all-new episode.